Hi, my name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested. Well, after a few delays, distractions, waiting for some supplies to arrive, and getting the ability to be able to repaint this comb and the ribbon cups, even though it didn't necessarily turn out quite as good as it should have. That's my inexperience with the paint sprayer. It's time to go ahead and reassemble this. Now, the first thing to do when you're doing this job is to remember what goes where. Now you'll note that we have 3 rows of keys, and forgive my atrocious handwriting, and we have the caps key, the figure lock key, then Q, ampersand, A, W, Z, S, E, and so forth. They don't just go in order here. And it's not really a good idea to try to install one row and skip the positions for the other one. It's just easier to simply do it all. Now, I have the first 4 keys in question, and if I put them in my hand in order, and I line the backs of them up, you can see that the springs all follow the same angle as this table here, whatever you want to call it. And the keys all look like this. Now there's an offset that occurs behind the comb. So the comb sits about here, and the offset sits over here. And this is to spread out the keys so that they can all sit nice and comfortably while still allowing them to be able to be compact and fit quickly and easily in the standard or pivot point in the back. Now, you'll see that there is a particular offset for each key, and if you mix them up, they aren't going to work. So I can't put this key next to this one and have it sit in the pattern. So it's kind of hard to mess up that way, but it's still handy to have a list of what goes where, at least a photograph. There is one issue though. There is, in addition to this comb, when you turn the typewriter over and you look, you can see there's another comb, well, sort of a comb, back here. And that is to act as a secondary guide and also to make sure that the key levers stay in position relative to these adjustment points here. Then you have the final comb in the standard and the bar that everything sits on top of, the pivot rod. Now, one problem is that to put these back in, I have to take the comb out, or at least knock it down. And that's unfortunate because this is kind of a pain to put right. Because once everything is in place, these screws are somewhat hard to access. Nevertheless, I'm going to take them off. Actually, should be using a bigger screwdriver. This one's a little tight. I'll go get my proper screwdriver. Not actually sure why these are binding so hard, but that's what we have. Let's go ahead and get that off. Last one. What I'm going to do, I'm going to attempt to keep the comb more or less in place, so that I don't have to try to figure out how to get it under these or anything else. So, let's go ahead and start with the Q. So I'll put this in here, tip it up if I can so I can see where that rear slot is. push it back far enough to be able to slide it down into its position. Tip it up and bring it back to its slot back here, and put it over that rod. And once it's in there, I want to go ahead and put the spring back in. So the only question I have now is I have two sets of springs that are mirrors of each other. So I have this one here. I have this other version. Come on. Right here. So note, this one has the loop up and this one has the loop down. So I just need to decide which one's going to go where, and the loop is what's going to sit in the edge of that key. So it's going to sit towards the outside. And you're going to take your thumb. So I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to kind of pick it up a little bit, bend it down, and then pull it through. And that spring right there will hold the keys in place as I work, so that as I move, they're not going to fall out. Next key is the ampersand, same drill. Let's lift it up. What I'm going to go do is I'm going to put that back there so I can tip this back up and have it stay. Slip that in through the next opening. Slide it back. Put it back in the standard. Grab a spring. Put that on the outside of that key lever. Make sure it's solid on the pivot rod. Bring it up and put it back in. And there we go. So I am going to go ahead and do that as best I can, and then I'll fast forward through this and we'll get to the next step, which is putting the type bars back on. Okay, so now we get to an interesting point here, which is worth taking some time to explain. That is that there is, back here, if I can point it out, a block right here. That is associated with the mounting for the escapement and ribbon advanced assembly up, escapement assembly up here. Now that seems to be blocking the C and the R key from coming up to the right height. However, what's actually happening is that these other keys are being allowed to go too high because the type bars are not yet connected. So this is something I just kind of have to accept and work around for the time being. So it's kind of apparent now that I should have built from the middle out. That would have let me have a little more room to manipulate some of these keys. in there. Right. Make sure you are in the right spot. Alright, so now I have half the keyboard done. You can see these things are sitting lower than they should. But if the comb is in place and down where it's supposed to be, and all the other keys are on, you can see they still have all the room to move that they need. So it's just a matter of getting the tight bars on to get everything to settle in place. So go ahead and lean this down again. And I'll finish up with the rest of these. And next one is... Okay, last key. That would be P. You can see a little on the outside, it's a lot easier than it was in the middle. So definitely the lesson learned from this time is to mark which keys are in the center of the keyboard first. And also when you get to this side, you can notice that I'm holding the key lever end of the spring out of the slot and then sliding it back up in. All right. Now that's done. Let's try to get this comb to fit. And that's just a matter of getting all the keys to align with their given slots. And not holding anything, not getting in the way of the comb so that I can't tip it up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to put in the first couple of screws here. Not tight, just to keep the comb from shifting as I work. All right, everything's lined up. Go ahead and cinch these down. Move some lights around so I can see better. And then I can figure out how to get the two inside screws in position. Okay, that was really super annoying. But all the keys are in. There's a slot for everything. They kind of stay in their slot. And now, the next fun part is putting these in place. So, there's only one way these can go. You can't get them mixed up. This bar has to face this way, and the slug has to face down. So if I try to put it over here, it ain't gonna work. I am going to go ahead and put all of these in place. And actually, before I do that, let me do one more thing. I have not yet both of the type bars down. Type levers. So let's go ahead and the screws. Okay, so we have 3 screws for each side, and we have one that has a taller head than the others. This one goes on the bottom there. So I'm going to go ahead and put the other 2 in place first. Now, if you note, there's a side here that's smoother than the side here where you can obviously see things had been scraped against it for the key levers. Even though this is cleaned, I want to make sure that that side goes down to match. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the top left. Not quite put it down. Go ahead and put it in the other one. Now everyone's nice and secure. And doesn't it look good to have the family back together again? Now, to put these type bars in requires some hardware that we took off earlier. So there are 4 screws with this, and actually I don't really need that quite right now. And these sit right here and hold the type bars in place. And the screws here are end check adjustments, or you could look at them as tension adjustments. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and get the whole lot here. Get them positioned. And what I need to do when I'm doing that is to put the relevant connection inside next to the type bar it's going to hook up to. So we do this one at a time. All right, now what I need to do is I need to get these reconnected. That means I'm going to go ahead and start from the back here. Of course, none of these are going to be easy. Okay, how about you lock focus there? Are going to take a little manipulation and maybe a little bit of help with the pair of pliers. There might be a better way to go about this whole process, but this is what I see so far. So what I'm figuring out to do here is come in from behind and use the hook on the type bar after I get the adjacent key out of the way to help push the spring open, and then gently pushing it back in place. That's proving fairly effective. Tedious, but effective. One problem is to make sure I don't actually cross any of these links. And keeping everything out of my way that I'm not working with. You know what they say, the last one's always the hardest. There we go. Okay, everything's in place. Nothing's broken. Now for the other side. Let's see if I can't accomplish this in a little different manner. Okay, this is going to be a little different. Okay, that's one. And in case you're confused, this is part of the job, learning how the right way to get things done so that you can do it better next time. See if a smaller screwdriver helps this. I'm having problems keeping the screwdriver out of the way of the hook. All right, last one. Okay, and that does that. I'm not sure which method works best, but the important thing is they both work. And now I have to put these in place and hold them down. I haven't cleaned this one yet, so I'm only going to put the one side in. There we go. Just enough to hold it down. And it's almost a typewriter again. All right, let me pause while I do some cleaning and get the other rod back in place. Okay, now that I got those in place, There is one more thing I have to do, which I forgot about earlier. That is to put this little piece on. That goes right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to take these screws out again, just the front ones. Back ones are thoroughly secure, so it's not going to move. So I'll go ahead and just feed that through here. Move the camera up so I can work easier. Okay, so that's threaded. Oops. Backwards. You can see the little relief cut for the adjacent screw right there. All right. That down. Let's do the other side. All right, there we go. One Oliver typewriter with all the type bars and keys back in place. Now note what I said earlier, that these are now all sitting at the same height. There will be when I get the type rest back in place. So the little block that was in the way before is no longer a problem. Of course, now I have to figure out why this is binding. I don't know if it's a comb or what. We'll find out. Let's see what happens to a little oil. Feels like it's being pinched. I'll figure it out. That's a minor problem. All right. And that's all I'm going to do today. I still have to put the space bar back on. When you do that, don't forget to put your little label in place, along with the space bar stops. And probably easiest to put the stops on first. Don't forget the type bar guards, which are going to be very important. And I hope that in this whole process, you have been very careful to make sure that you don't bend any of the type bars, because that's going to be a job to tune up. Then you also have to put the lock back in place. So like I said, I've got my type RS, I've got my ribbon cups, and I'm down to, after that, few screws and replacement felt, and then I get to put the ribbon back on. All right, so almost done. Once again, my name is Wayne, and this is a fairly long type tested.